Okay, perfect. Just as a reminder that the meeting will be live streamed, and recorded and available by the internet on the town's website at www.parrysound.ca. So welcome everyone, and are there any additions or prioritization of the agenda? No? Mover and seconder for the agenda, Councillor Keith, Councillor Backman. The council agenda for February 27th, 2020 be approved as circulated. All in favor? That's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? No? Okay. I'm sure there'll be questions of staff later on. Correspondence then, Ms. Johnson.
Your Worship, we just have one item of correspondence that was added to the agenda after it was circulated on Friday. This item was sent to members of council today. It was from the Make-A-Wish Canada, for, requesting a 2020 donation of a $349 sponsorship ad in their 25th anniversary issue. We brought it forward because of the nature of the request.
Okay,
And that's
thank
it.
you. Okay. So next is deputations. Welcome. We have one deputation tonight. It's Laurie Delnett, Executive Director, and Dan DiNicolo, President of the Chamber of Commerce. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. We have a short presentation for you this evening. We, of course, were supposed to be here a few weeks back, and life kind of got in the way. And so we're here now, happy to be here, and thank you for having us. We're trying not to take up too much of your time. We know you got some important things to discuss tonight. So we're here with the Parry Sound Area Chamber of Commerce, and just giving you a quick review of what 2019 held for us, and a little bit of what we've got planned moving forward. Quick review, 2019, year of big change for us at the Chamber. Beginning of the year, a new board was formed. That included new executives, including president, vice president, and treasurer. So basically the whole executive team changed at the Chamber. The new president is me. Hi. And the new vice president is Dr. David Clinnings, and then of course our treasurer is returning to the board, or has returned to the board, is Allison Scarrow. We also have a new executive director, and so I'd like to introduce you to our executive director, Laurie Delnett. And we've also got a number of partnerships that we've worked on through the year, and so I'm going to kind of briefly work our way through those as well. So number one thing, the biggest challenge that I'd say we faced last year, our executive director announced quite abruptly in July that she was leaving, and that left us basically in a massive holding pattern through the summer. Of course, all of our member businesses tend to be extremely busy in the summer. It was about the worst possible timing we could have imagined. We somehow managed to limp through, pay a couple of the bills, and kind of, didn't really keep the lights on, but kept the emails answered and so on. What ultimately ended up culminating was our search for an executive director ended with us hiring Laurie, and so that was in August 2019. And one of the exciting things about Laurie is that in addition to her role as the executive director of our chamber, she also plays a role in a new strategic partnership arrangement, and that is our partnership with the Business Center of Nipissing Parry Sound. So for those of you who may not be familiar, the Business Center of Nipissing Parry Sound is basically an organization that helps to teach, learn, facilitate, and help business owners start new businesses or build their businesses in new and innovative ways through a variety of things, including education, one-on-one support, counseling, all sorts of things. So we've always had this goal in mind of moving towards more of a one-stop shopping solution. And so one of the things that this brings us is kind of the new business development portion of the arrangement under the same roof as the existing chamber family. And so what this has done for us, while Laurie is still our full-time executive director, she is also a part-time business development officer with the business center. And this has been an incredible arrangement for us. Really made a big, big difference to our organization and helps us to sort of streamline. We can help new business owners when they come in the door, finding the resources that they need, and then ultimately kind of move them through and help them find the benefits of chamber membership as well. So that's been pretty awesome for us, and probably the biggest single thing that's happened or happened to us in 2019. Of course, we have a number of things that we do as a chamber, and one of the things is helping businesses network and business owners communicate and keep in touch with one another, and just trying to foster an environment where businesses can understand that they each have their individual interests, but also common interests. And so one of the things that we launched in 2018 was what we call our end of season celebration cruise. We had that again this year, 2-hour cruise in the evening in September on the Island Queen, and this year we were 175, I think. So 175 business people come out on that cruise, and we saw just a great uptake. It was a gorgeous evening, and it still blows my mind how many people live and work in this area and don't understand what's happening just out there on the water. So a really cool evening. We couldn't have had better weather, and an awesome thing that is going to end up being a going concern for us. So that's pretty exciting. Another thing that we try to do, and it of course depends on timing, is facilitate civic engagement. So Tuesday, October the 15th at the Stocky Center, we had an all candidates meeting that was sponsored by the Lakeland Association of Realtors, and it's pretty amazing. Full house. Like, it's pretty wild. And when you tell people, hey, come into a room and listen to a bunch of politicians, and you fill the whole Stocky Center, it's pretty awesome. But we had a secret. We had a bar. And as far as I understand things, we were the first time ever that anybody in that room had been to an all candidates meeting that actually had a functioning bar in the lobby, and it went over really well. So that was good news. Well attended, always happy to try to facilitate things like this, and happy to see it in a facility like the Stocky Center, where people really had an opportunity to engage with the candidates beforehand, and then listen to their answers to questions. Of course, it seems like this year every single event that we put on also coincided with a Town of Parry Sound Council event of some kind, and so that's the reason none of you guys were there, I'm sure. Another thing that we do as a chamber is advocate for businesses. So last year, I had the opportunity to attend for the first time what's called Advocacy Day down at Queen's Park. This is something that it was the first time I had ever attended, and it's a pretty mind-blowing affair. A lot of interaction and engagement with MPs and senior government officials. I'm going to admit, last year I was fully overwhelmed, had no idea what to expect. This year I've got a new suit, and we're going again next month. So that's pretty exciting. We're signed up for, Lori and I are both going down, and we've already signed up for a number of courses and meetings with ministers, and so just a great opportunity to advocate not only for the local business community, but also Parry Sound area more generally. So excited for that. Another thing that we started this year, and this is a first time for us, our first timer, was trying to focus a little bit on how we connect the business community and our members to the not-for-profit sector in our community. So knowing that and witnessing the hard work that some of our members put into community food programs, so specifically Harvest Share and Community Living's Community Kitchens program, we sat down with them and came up with this idea of a community dinner that we held at the Stocky Center. It actually ended up being 2 community dinners. And the name of the event was One Table Bridging Community. And so the idea there was to just try to facilitate at a festive time of the year. It was Monday, December 2nd, an evening where we could all sit down and enjoy a meal together at one big table. What was kind of neat about this was Community Living and Harvest Share sorted out the food preparation and serving elements. We did 2 full seatings, fully sold out. The price was very economical at $12.50 per person. And the goal was to have the people in attendance witness and take part in the same type of meal that is actually served on a Wednesday night at the Mary Street Center. So that's the drop-in meal that they did. So we were eating the exact same kind of meal, and I'm going to tell you, it was fantastic. It was absolutely, the food was incredible. And most incredible was just this idea of like 70 people sitting down together for a meal at one big long table. So it was a pretty magical night, I think. There's a bit of a picture, a little bit hard to see on the bigger screen, but we literally had one big long table that ran through the facility, and at the end of it, the chamber's role in this was primarily to help get the word out and to sell tickets, but 100% of the money that was raised was split between community food programs. So thus far, and it's not done yet, just with the meal portion, we raised $1,000 for Harvest Share and $1,000 for our Community Living's food program. So, and I think just a good awareness builder, and so we're happy to be involved with that. Another idea that we've been working on recently, and it's actually very timely that we bring this up, is the Parry Sound Area Founders Circle. So I personally am a founder, not member, not as a member of the chamber, but Lori is as a supporter. And so we decided, and our board decided, to lend administrative support to this endeavor. And there are 32 founders in Parry Sound who each basically put $1,000 into the cause of their own money, and we're on March 1st. We come to our deadline for applications. So if you know anybody that's got a great idea and looking for funding, there's two prizes. One's a grand prize of $10,000. The second is a second prize of $5,000, and we begin whittling down the applications as soon as they're received. I believe right now we're over a dozen applications received, so that's pretty cool. And this idea sort of culminates throughout the entire district of Parry Sound. So it's an idea for us as a business community to also kind of expand our reach a little bit. Another thing we've been working on this past year, promoting collaboration. So first and foremost, a strategic partnership with the Business Center Nipissing Parry Sound. Then engaging with other local institutions and service providers, including Canada College, YMCA Employment Services, CB&DC, the Labor Market Group, and others. Also actively involved in the West Parry Sound Employment Council and the creation of a local business resource group that we're working on, that we're hoping will help to facilitate an easier understanding of the resources that are available to businesses by coordinating actively between the groups so that there's not a lot of duplication happening. And then another thing that's new for us this year, co-hosting events with neighboring chambers. So we've done 2 events with the Muskoka Lakes Chamber of Commerce, and that's a great opportunity. There may be lines on a map, but our members kind of drive over those lines all the time, so anything we can do to kind of build out the bigger community and in a cooperative manner is pretty key. So coming soon, our Business Excellence Awards, with the resignation of our previous executive director, had to be put off last year. So we're rebooting that. That's coming up at the Stocky Center on Thursday, April 16th. I can't give too much away on that right now. We've got a whole new type of event planned. So it's not your standard sit-down dinner, but more on that later. We're also pending approval of a 2-year NOHFC intern staff member to be shared between the Business Center and the Chamber. So this is another place where that collaboration has given us an opportunity that we otherwise wouldn't have. So it's a joint application. We're just waiting, I think, on the final go ahead on that. So that will be another kind of human resource in the office very soon, we hope. A variety of business after-hours networking events planned, as well as business educational opportunities upcoming. And then the future of the Chamber. So focus on strengthening the foundation of the Chamber through partnerships, collaboration, and building a stronger membership base. To be a tight ship financially with a focus on running lean, to seek out revenue opportunities and strategic partners that will help us to reduce the need for financial assistance from municipal partners in the future. An increased focus on helping new businesses start and existing businesses find their collective ways. And that's the end of my story. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them now.
Any questions from council members? Councillor Bachman?
Thank you very much for your presentation, and it's very nice to meet you again. Congratulations in your new role. I just wanted to ask specifically with regards to the monies provided by the town of Parry Sound, where exactly does the Chamber of Commerce allocate those?
So right now, it's fair to say that those go into our general revenues. Like that is in our contributions. And so in the past, that has been money that without we couldn't have even got through the day-to-day operations. Our goal is to get away from that, but we don't at this exact moment we don't specifically allocate that to any particular project or anything. We haven't been in a position to do that, to be quite honest.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor McCann.
Thank you. I'm curious, when you mentioned the business center, is there an overlap with the CB and DC? Is there any comparison between the two services?
I'll let Lori take that.
Yeah, we don't specifically, other than our starter company grant program, don't specifically offer financing assistance or any of that sort of thing. Our focus is on business plan development, education, the workshops to help entrepreneurs get their business off the ground. Typically, I get referrals from CB&DC. They'll send people to me to get the business plan looking the way it should be and make sure the content is there, and they'll often end up back at CB&DC at some point when they're ready to pursue funding opportunities.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, so next we'll go right to the budget, 9.4.1, and Mr. Harris, you wanted to start with some opening remarks?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the purpose of this evening's special council meeting is this is our first opportunity to present both the operating and the capital budgets in any level of detail. This evening there's three objectives we'd like to achieve. First, present and address any comments or questions with respect to the town's operating budget. Secondly, there's a list of proposed capital projects for 2020, so to review that list and get council's endorsement for that list. And then thirdly, there's a list of items that's termed items for council consideration. There's a list included in the budget package that has identified items, the cost, the implications, operating and capital, and so on. And those items are not included in the budget that's being presented this evening. So we want to get council's, answer any questions and get council's concurrence whether they should be included in the budget or remain something that we're not going to proceed with this year. Detailed budget package was provided to members of council, members of the public last Friday, so it's been out on for a while for anybody that wanted to review it. I'd like to thank the staff. It's quite a consolidated effort to get the budget package where it is today for you. We're a couple of months earlier than last year, so that's good. Particularly the finance staff that takes the lead on pulling this together. So I appreciate all their efforts to get the budget to before you today. This is a budget that the senior leadership team believes is a very responsible budget. You'll see there's a very minimal tax increase, much less than the rate of inflation that's proposed for the town's operations. A little bit more detail of that following. So following the presentation by the Director of Finance, after addressing any questions that council may have, at that point we can be in a better position to determine does council have more questions? Do we want to set another special meeting to have some further dialogue, or is council comfortable in moving it forward to a council meeting where we would prepare a bylaw and adopt the budget? So we'll see how we end this evening to see what the direction is that council is comfortable in proceeding with. So at this point, I'd just like to turn over to Stephanie Phillips, our Director of Finance, and she's going to go through a little bit more detailed presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So tonight, I'm pleased to present the town's 2020 draft budget to council. And accompanying me is Christine Gilbert, my manager of accounting, I just want to take the opportunity to thank Christine for her contribution to the budget, because a lot of work goes behind the preparation of the document before you. So, moving on to the agenda. On the agenda for tonight is an overview of the 2020 budget and information on the impact to the taxpayer. That will be followed by a look at the historical tax rate increase, and then I'll move on to discuss the operating budget and the net changes by division. The capital budget will follow that, and then we'll get into items for council consideration. So throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask any questions that you might have. Okay. So for 2020, staff have been successful in delivering the operations budget with an increase below inflation at 0.96%. And this combined with the dedicated annual infrastructure levy of 1.8% totals a 2.76% increase net of growth. Since all taxpayers have a different property assessment, it's useful to illustrate the increase per $100,000 in residential assessment. So this slide shows that the taxpayer will pay $37.29 more per year, or $3.11 additional per month for every $100,000 in residential assessment. So the next slide here shows the property taxpayer how they can calculate the impact for their property assessment. The average home in Parry Sound is assessed at $195,000. So this slide shows that the taxpayer would pay $72.72 more per year, or $6.06 additional per month when the increase is converted to a home for $195,000 assessed value. This slide shows the historical tax rate increases for the town. In this term of council, the town has successfully kept operating increases below inflation at less than 1%. This chart illustrates that the town generates revenues by seeking out grants through they also generate revenues through investment earnings and other means to provide services. $9.8 million is funded by property taxation, and the other $4.2 million of property tax supported operations are funded through other revenues. So 62% of the operating budget supports essential services like protection, environmental, and transportation, and that represents the majority of operating expenses. So if we want to just move on to page 27 of the budget book, and that's under supporting our community tab. So this table shown on the screen here shows that that under the general government section, there is a negative percentage change, so that means there's no increase there. Under the health unit, under health services, the current year increase is $9,223. So to be proactive, the current budget plans to transfer $29,519 to reserve to go towards the increase that's expected for 2021, which is 42%. Okay, and then moving on, there's an operations manager position under the transportation services section of this division here. Also in that section, there's a transfer to reserve to plan for future annual debt repayment that's related to Wabick Street or Isabella Street, because those projects will be completed in this year, and then they're planned to be borrowed for, so to smooth the increase that would be required all in 1 year in 2021. That's what's planned here. And then under the BOCC, the increase that's showing there is really for the ice pad replacement borrowing, the majority of that. And then under Stocky Center, this $47,333 is the borrowing for the roof and siding project that begins repayment in 2021. Okay, so let's move on, unless there's any
No,
questions in this
There,
particular
yeah,
section.
Councillor Borneman has a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. I want to back up to the health unit, and I realize that that's beyond the town's scope to some extent, but there's a significant increase there, and I don't really understand the rationale for that. Do we know? Are they providing additional programming, or what's going on with the health unit that it's costing us more money?
So the communications that have been provided are that the funding will change, where municipalities will pick up 30% and the government, or the higher level government, would pick up 70, as opposed to an 80-20 funding ratio. Yes, that's what it is.
Yeah. But what also happened with that too was that there were a number of programs that were 100% funded by the province, and those programs now are funded 30-70. So we're picking up the tab on those 30% of those ones that were funded 100% before. So it means an additional cost. Now, the impact on this year is that the government has said they will cover anything over a 10% increase of whatever a health unit has. But in 2021, look out, because we're not sure what's going to happen then. The increase was much more significant than what this actually was. It was around 30% or 34%, something like that. So in 2021, there could be a much more significant increase that we need to be prepared for.
Yes, that's right. I just want to go back and mention something from the budget overview. A key point that I wanted to mention was that the town's budget had an impact of $239,000 related to affordable housing projects. So that's one of the pressures that led to us having to have an operations increase at all. So other than that, we've controlled costs within what's expected.
Thank you. So Councillor Borneman, yes, you are right, it is a download. Mr. Harris has something that...
Just with respect to the health unit, the downloading, we've included in this year's budget, as Ms. Phillips said, more than the actual impact, because next year's impact is going to be so great. So we're trying to spread the impact of the taxpayer over the 2 years. And that's why you see a little bigger increase this year than what we actually have to absorb, but that's to soften the blow or soften the impact for next year.
Yeah. Councillor McCann?
Yeah, thank you. Can you, you were saying something about affordable housing. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. So, in 2021, there are $239,000 in taxation write-offs expected for current year and previous year related to affordable housing projects that become exempt within the year.
Okay, right, with the impact ruling. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Continue?
Yep, continue
Okay.
on. Yep.
Okay, so the draft 2020 capital budget. So there are 10.8 million in projects carried forward from 2019 and 5 million in new projects for 2020. So that's 15.8 million altogether. And of those projects, 5.4 million was received in, or is planned to be received in grant funding. And then on the next slide, this shows where the dedicated capital levy goes. So this is, if you turn to page 116 of the budget book, for 2020, the contribution for reserve for building replacement is 121,460, so that's a new contribution for the year. And then in addition to that, the town contributes $467,985 towards fleet towards the fleet replacement, and then equipment towards an equipment reserve for that program. The contribution is $165,594. Okay, so in the capital budget section of your book, under tab 13, we can begin to go through the capital projects. Yeah, so firstly, Isabella Street and Waback Street are multi-year projects that are planned for completion in 2020 and should be done around spring, something like that. The change that's shown here is really the difference that's already been awarded through a tender, but just from the 2019 budget to the 2020 budget, what's expected to change? Okay. So under the carry forward projects, there's a column to the right, and that outlines the change between what was budgeted in 2019 and what's budgeted for 2020. So I'll only outline the items that have a change, but if you have any questions about any of the other items, you can just jump in, feel free to jump in and ask questions. So at the sewage pump station number 3, an additional $100,000 is added to the budget for construction. The station is aged and subject to numerous repairs, so the flows are also ever increasing due to a new building north of the station. So that's expected to go up a bit, the cost of that replacement. And then for Mission Park, there's an increase of $48,000 as compared to what was budgeted in 2019. $8,000 additional is required for the increased estimated cost of the equipment, and another $40,000 is required for fall safety material and installation, and that's due to regulations changing, requiring a recycled rubberized material that can be cleaned and improves the safety of the play area. So and then BOCC tables and chairs. In 2019, half of the equipment that needed to be replaced was budgeted, and then included in the 2020 capital budget is the other half. So for economies of scale and getting a better price, staff have included the other half of the equipment that needs repaired. So, moving on.
Sorry,
Sorry
Councillor
about that.
Keith.
You talk quicker than evidently my eyeballs see at times. And if you could just go back and explain clearly, Mission Park, there's a $48,000 change. I understood, did I hear 40,000 is for safety? And what's
Yeah.
8,000 for the equipment? Is that?
Yes,
I
so-
might be missing something there. Can you clear that up?
Yes, so $8,000 additional is required for increased estimated cost of the equipment, and then $40,000 is required for a fall safety material due to changing regulations requiring that a recycled rubberized material be installed around the play area. Yes. Do you want?
Seems awful expensive. How do we know that it's that much?
I'll just call up April to help me with.
Through your worship, CSA playground standards have changed. Fall safety zones used to be able to use recycled wood chips in the fall safety zone or a sand-based material. That's no longer the case anymore. The standard has changed, and we now require rubber matting to be placed. I actually was a colleague in a former place of employment passed along an actual quote for that rubberized matting material. So those costs are pretty reflective of what they will be.
Councillor Keith.
Just for clarification, roughly how long is the rubber matting supposed to last? Like 10 years, 2 years?
Through your worship, from my research, it's a 20-year lifespan on that rubberized matting.
Okay. Councillor Bachman.
Just in regards to the fall safe zone, can you explain if we have that in our other parks? Like, I'm thinking of the pole entrance, for instance, is that considered a fall zone?
Through your worship, this applies to all new construction. So all of our current playgrounds are grandfathered. If I am making changes to a playground system or structure, the new fall zone is required.
Okay. Councillor Borneman, then Councillor McCann.
I'm in the same boat as Councillor Keith. You're going faster than I can process here. I want to back up a little bit to this sewage pump station and ask if Mr. O'Donnell or Mr. Kearns or you can tell me first where sewage pumping station 3 is and what the extra 100 Gs, is that just inflation or what are we doing differently than what we were going to do a year ago?
Okay, Pump Station 3 is the one off of Hawthorne Crescent.
Okay.
And I believe that the change is just from some updated numbers from doing some further evaluation and engineering on what's required.
So we just need bigger pieces than what we were getting a year ago,
It-
basically.
Well, I think it's probably a more complete estimate from what was gathered previously. There are some unique characteristics in that area surrounding the pump station.
So when we do these rebuilds of the pumping stations, are we including backup generators and all of that? Mr. O'Donnell's nodding his head, so that's a yes. Thank you.
It's all good to have the backup. Councillor McCann.
Thank you. I'm just curious, I know there's no change on this line, but the refurbishing of cemetery pickup, what is that?
So I can speak to that a little bit. I think in the 2019 budget, there was originally a price in there to replace a pickup. And then throughout the year, it changed what we were going to do with that. It became the refurbishment of a pickup that we already owned. So it still shows the original price here. But I don't know, is there additional information on that, or is that pretty much covered?
So that is carried over because the project wasn't completed last year, so there is no change. The Public Works unit did receive their new truck. The repairs have not been made to the existing truck to then be transferred on.
Thank you.
Councillor Bachman.
Just one more question for April, Ms. McNamara. With regards to the new padding, if we were to update any of the further playgrounds, would we no longer be able to use sand then?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Thank you.
We're good? Continue on.
Okay, I'll try to slow it down a little bit. Take pause between projects in case
Take a
someone
breath.
wants to jump in.
Take a breath.
Okay. So on page 120, the annual capital expenditures. So this first table shows the areas where the town normally has capital projects every year. So there's 24,000 in here for laptop, desktop replacement, 28,000 for firefighters gear, 12,750 for firefighters PPE,
60,000 is here for traffic light control system improvements. 406,185 is allocated towards paving. This is uses gas tax funding. And then 15,000 is the annual cost for water meter replacement. Okay. So under general government, the areas that fall under that division are the Office of the CAO, Finance and Information Technology. There's a project for IT infrastructure upgrade for $17,000. And then a surveillance camera systems improvements for $2,760. And then, so 1,740 of that was planned to be funded through POA. So there's still consultation happening regarding that. So if it's not approved through the partners, what will happen is that the amount spent on surveillance camera systems, from my understanding, will become $2,400 as opposed to the total amount that's here.
So a question on these
Plus
particular items.
2,760.
On
Yeah.
these particular items, can we not use some of the money that Municipal Affairs and Housing gave us with regard to upgrades to our systems? Because these are, the key fob is an upgrade to our municipal system. The surveillance cameras are also that as well.
From my understanding, the key fob system has been approved in principle to be funded in part by the municipal partners, with the remainder, the 12,200, to come from town operations. But how we use that how council wishes to use the modernization funding is completely up to council. However, like, the idea was to fund projects that would create efficiencies, but this is it is a modernization type IT project in some way.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, because we're going to be changing the front office as well. So, and this is a modernization of that compared to the system that we have. Why not take advantage of that funding?
At this time too, we have submitted an expression of interest for a project related to the modernization phase. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yes.
Yeah, we've, the province announced another program this fall, and Town of Parry Sound, we submitted an application. It's also under the modernization, and it is for IT and looking at where we might get some economies of scale through different systems, different applications. And we even suggested in that application that we might look at what the area municipalities are doing from a technology point of view and see if there's opportunities to work together collaboratively. If we're replacing a system, we're looking at a building permit system, perhaps the other municipalities are, and we get some economies. Some of that modernization money that we got from the province last year might be required, depending on the amount of funding that we're going to get from the province. On this particular project, if it's 100% funding or 50% funding, they haven't indicated at this point. So we may come back to council with a need to spend some of that modernization money on this project. We just don't have any details yet, but it's something that's in the works.
How are we sitting on that modernization fund? As far as that goes?
To date, we spent a little bit of money last year, and Stephanie may have the details. We've been kind of at the senior leadership team looking for where are some places that we might be able to spend that modernization money that's going to give us dividends, i.e. savings in the future. We're really hoping to identify something along those lines. Something that we wouldn't, because I think we got about 600,000.
I know.
It's not the kind of money that you're going to come up with every day from the taxpayer, so we've been trying to hold off to find what's the best place to spend that money.
Well, all I'm thinking of is that there are a few other things that we're going to be going through in that next section, that this would help pare down the operating budget that we could alleviate, balance one out with the other. So I'm just thinking if we've got some funding in there, which I don't see it in our reserve summary unless someone can tell me which item that is. Which reserve it is. Yes, Ms. Gilbert.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that it was set up in a reserve fund last year. It was established as deferred revenue to be recognized as we use it. I don't believe there was a transfer to a reserve or a reserve fund.
So it's not listed in our
I don't
document.
believe it was established there. It is recorded on the books as deferred revenue.
There will be a report come forward as part of the end of 2019 that
Okay.
will request a transfer of whatever hasn't been spent in 2019 to a reserve for projects for the modernization grant.
Yep.
And then I just wanted to mention in 2019, the one main project that was funded from that was just the $50,000 that went towards the recreation master plan. So that's been carried forward into 2020, and that's in the current budget.
Okay. All right. Councilor Borneman.
Well, between you and that last section about security cameras at different town facilities, it seems to me that policing is one of the major costs that we face, and I'm wondering if installing other surveillance cameras, especially in the downtown core, we had an incidence of violence or vandalism night before last right across the street. I'm wondering if installing additional surveillance cameras might curtail that and mitigate the ongoing increases in policing costs that the community continues to face.
Yeah, the policing costs certainly aren't going down. So, did you have a? No. Okay.
No, it's okay.
Councilor Bachman then.
Yeah, I'd just like to concur with Councillor Borneman, and just at the past conference I attended this week, there were various surveillance vendors at the trade show, and it was pretty interesting to see the different types of setup. And that is one of the facts that they did point out is how to partner with providing different levels of safety and service to the citizens, and partnering with the different BIAs and working closer with the OPP that could help and refrain from these costs, and hurt our economic development.
Councilor Keith.
I guess what I would add is whatever figure we come up with tonight is fine. It may be appropriate for right now, but it sounds to me like we need a report to have an idea exactly how many cameras we need, and why aren't we just looking at surveillance of all our municipal properties, including, and maybe even a better system that we have at the Kinsman Park, but including a figure for the whole works rather than this piecemeal.
Yes.
So from my understanding, the surveillance cameras that are being proposed here have come out of a security review. So in the specific locations here, there was a review that took place at the municipal office in particular. So.
Yes. Yeah. Councilor Keith.
I think I'm thinking along the same way in reference, I believe that was in reference to provincial offenses, so it had to do with this building. But I think, and maybe I'm not trying to speak for Councillor Borneman, but I will say that I kind of got the impression that we're also talking about other municipal buildings, and that's what I'm thinking of when I'm looking at surveillance cameras, not just this building per se here, and that's why I'm mentioning about our reports. We have a better idea of what sort of cost figure we're talking about for perhaps the next budget.
Yes, Councilor Borneman.
You know, I don't think it should be restricted to municipal buildings. If we can save money by putting a camera up on the stoplights at the corner of the banks and one up at the post office, and, in key locations where we know are prone to after hours, and I don't know what the studies say, whether those are serviceable, whether they actually decrease the rate of vandalism and whatnot. you know, somebody smarter than me would have to, as Bonnie says, do the study on that, but I don't think it should be strictly municipal properties. It should be, if we can save money in policing costs by installing what are becoming relatively cost-effective tools, then that's what we should be doing.
Well, you don't go anywhere in Europe without a camera somewhere. Anyway, I think we should be taking a look at the surveillance.
Through to the mayor. Yeah, staff have no issue with looking at that. I think a report is a good idea. There are other implications, privacy issues, who has access to the cameras, and how that information that's captured is disseminated to people. So, you know, if we're going to do it, we want to do it properly. So we have no problem looking at it. I doubt if we could pull that information together for the time this budget's approved, but that we can put that on if council wants, we can take.
I think the other part of that is red light cameras, and because they're becoming, there's just a lot of people running red lights and running through stop streets, and you know, they're doing it in other communities, and with our POA revenue going down, that's because those people have to be ticketed. But if we can work on another system that catches these people that feel that they are either need to go too fast or can run red lights or stop signs, then I think we should begin to take a look at that. And that is a modernization, definitely, topic. So, yes, Councillor Backman.
Just in respect to the surveillance, one of the things I learned again at the conference this weekend was that a lot of the risk management component falls under just again evidence and documentation on how. So that was also something that very interesting on how these surveillance could be valuable in saving costs to the municipality as well.
Yeah, they were mentioning putting cameras on the plow trucks and that sort of thing, so that there was actually a video log of what the plows were actually doing, and that they were at a certain place at a certain time, and it was helping in court cases when people were complaining about or taking a municipality to court about lack of service and that sort of thing. So I think there's areas that we definitely can take a look at. Okay.
Okay. So the next project is a meeting room upgrade. So this project is to convert the mail room into a meeting room that is more adequate in size. So the current meeting room at the municipal office, the backs of the chairs actually touch the walls in the meeting room. So if anyone has to stand up to leave the meeting, they can't get by anyone. And the meeting room often fills up. It's a smaller size than what's necessary for a lot of the meetings that take place in there.
Good. Councillor Keith?
Just for clarification, are we talking about the meeting room in basically the basement of the building here? Is that what we're referring to, or somewhere else?
Across from the kitchen.
Across from the kitchen?
Lunchroom,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah.
The lunchroom. Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Yeah. Not the basement. No, I know.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, the next division here is protection services, and that includes emergency and protective services, fire services, by law enforcement, and building inspection. The first project here is a floor painting at the pound, so 50-50 of that is going to be funded from the tax levy and municipal partners. The fire hall improvement of the ready room, 50,000 is budgeted to be transferred from reserve funds for these improvements, which are Ministry of Labor type improvements that were required. Parking ticket software, 15,000 is budgeted to be funded from. This is from the modernization funding here in the 2020 budget.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Keith. Yep.
These parking ticket software, can somebody explain to me, I take it, is this software going to be, is it compatible with what other equipment we have, and how long is it supposed to last? I'm not really quite clear.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the reason for this is that the parking ticketing software that we currently use is end of life. It's so end of life that we're going to have to start doing manual ticketing rather than software at all. So that's the need for this replacement. It will be a completely new system since any component of the old system is completely outdated. The benefits here are that the efficiencies with regard to processing the tickets are going to be greatly increased with modern equipment.
So just for clarification, with this new piece of the parking ticket software, once you have that, are you going to need to have something else that's compatible with that parking ticket software? Because sometimes that happens.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is going to be everything that's included to move into an entirely different program to do parking ticketing.
Councillor Barnabas?
Well, the next question is how many dollars are we generating, and without parking meters and whatnot, how many dollars are we generating through parking enforcement, and what's the payback time on this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm estimating here because I don't have that number on the tip of my tongue, but we will generate more dollars in parking tickets than this amount in 1 year. Oh, absolutely. There's a cost of doing business too, outside of just writing tickets.
Councillor McCann, then Councillor Keith.
So 2 questions. This has nothing to do with POA then, I understand? Simply,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely not. This is solely for Town of Parry Sound bylaw.
so ticketing, is it restricted to parking violations or other bylaw violations? Are they included in this system?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a 2-part question. And this particular component, this $15,000, will do nothing else other than parking tickets. Parking tickets are a very unique program of ticketing. We do ticket for other things, specifically fire code violations, but that's all done through provincial offenses tickets, which is a different process.
So my last question then is this a license, or does this expire at any point in time?
This is, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is for the hardware and the software for a new system. There is licensing that occurs on an annual basis. With our current system, we have licensing that occurs on an annual basis. So that will continue to just roll over. This is for the new software and hardware for the equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Keith.
Well, I guess still a couple more things then. I think if this comes back, it certainly should be clear that it's parking ticket software and hardware for the 15,000 for the old equipment that is just about died. How long did it last before it came to its death?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would suggest it was purchased just before I came here, so it's 7 or 8 years old. The equipment that's end of life.
The last question to that then is, how long is it anticipated this new software and hardware should last? Or is it equal to 7 years, more than 7 years? I'm looking at payback.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would suggest a 7-year lifespan would be what we should be considering.
Okay, continue.
Okay, so moving on to transportation services. So this division includes transportation operations and winter control. The first project is Parry Sound Drive ditching for $60,000. This project was originally in the 2019 budget, but was reallocated to another project. So it comes back as if it's a new project again in 2020 in this budget. Operations yard paving
is in the budget for 130,000.
Sorry, Councillor Borneman.
I don't recall seeing this before. 130 grand is a fair bit of paving. What's changed at the operations yard that we're paving that rather than Church Street, Bow Street, and I can go on? I just think that the taxpayer is better served by, unless you can convince me otherwise, and I understand, Mr. Kearns, you're pretty new and you may need to have a little bit of time to get some background on this one.
Through your worship, you're correct. I am not clear on exactly what the extent of the paving is being proposed. Having been at the works yard, it could use some paving, but and perhaps we'll take a closer look at exactly what is being proposed, and certainly make sure that they're it's deemed necessary and that there's value in the work that will be done.
So maybe I could ask that when we come back, or I'm assuming that we may come back, that we have some information about this, or subsequently we'll get some information about this.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to come back to the budget. I think there's a number of questions that are revolve around this and need to know, and I think not only for, especially with this particular department, not only for council to know, but I think our new director of public works as well needs to make sure that he's up to speed on this. So I think we're going to have another meeting, and I think we've got a list of questions that obviously are being logged, and we'll go from there and deal with those at a subsequent meeting. So anyway, but we'll continue on. Oh, Councillor Bachman?
Just Mr. Kearns, if you can elaborate a little bit more on the Parry Sound Drive ditching.
Through your worship, I think Ms. Phillips mentioned that this was not really a carryover, but a comeback as the funds were reallocated previously. So this may be seen more as perhaps a maintenance type project, but with a value that perhaps fits better into our capital allocation. I'm almost asking that as a question. Because I'm not specifically familiar with where it came from in the first place, but typically when it's not atypical to have a project of that value end up as a capital item, where it kind of could be considered a maintenance type activity.
We can do some, I propose that we do a little bit more background research, and then we'll send out some information to council to support or background information on the project so that everybody knows.
That would be appreciated.
Some more information related to that project specifically. So something will come forward in an email or back to the next council meeting regarding that, if that's okay.
Yep, that'd be
Thank you.
appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Next item.
Okay. So trackless blades related to the sidewalk plow are required for $16,000, and this is funded from tax levy. So a sidewalk plow, a public works truck, and a director of public works vehicle are in the fleet replacement plan for 2020. These are to be funded from the fleet replacement reserve. The director of public works vehicle is a leased vehicle, so what's in here as a replacement value is to purchase out the lease. So an analysis was done of what was the most advantageous, and it was determined that to purchase out the lease would be better than to purchase a new vehicle at this time related to that. Okay, environmental services. This includes stormwater control, waste management, wastewater services, and water services. So sewage pump station 5 upgrade. for 20,000. Sewage pump station 5 grease control for 20,000. Culvert lining Perry Sound Drive, 150,000 is allocated here from OSIF funding. Gate security at the wastewater, this 30,000 is required for safety reasons and security of the wastewater site.
Councillor Keith?
Yes, maybe for clarity, and I'll see we'll be jumping to the next, maybe each time there's another sewage pump station here, I'd like to know where the location is. So I don't know where 5 is or 6 or probably 7, 8, 9, whatever.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, it's down by the power dams. It's on Cascade Street, so just down the hill, the power dams, Station 5.
Okay.
Oh, 6, that's behind Beaver Lumber, right? Or McNabb's?
Yeah, that's correct. It's McNabb's lumber.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Donnell, just stick around for a minute,
Dating
just in
myself.
case.
Okay. So sewage pump station 6. So there's a pump replacement scheduled for 2020 at a cost of $200,000, and this requires a pump lifting device for $100,000. And due to a change to safety regulations, the upgrade of this pump station requires an additional electrical upgrade with a substantial cost of $1.5 million.
Councillor McCann?
1.5 million, that's quite a bit. Do we have any information as to why it's so much? I mean, I know these things are not cheap, but that seems like an awful lot.
I do know that pumping station number 6 had significant amount of work done a number of years ago. Pumping station number 6 handles everything from this side of the town that goes across the river. So everything collects pumping station number 6 and goes across. At some point, it'd be prudent for the town to figure out how we can defer everything not going through number 6 and having another one. But that's a redesign of our pumping whole system to make that work. So it taxes this system a significant amount, but I'll let Mike and Jamie further elaborate, I think, on what's actually happening here.
So through you, your worship, so we have had meetings related to the engineering of this pump station in particular. So these 3 items are somewhat intertwined here that you see for pump station 6. So I guess I don't think I would be incorrect in calling it an antiquated pump that is up for replacement. It's not a style of pump that's utilized probably anywhere in a new installation now. It's very difficult to retrofit. It's not what's used anymore. When it was initially installed or originally installed, it certainly would have been more than adequate, but that was quite some time ago. So having said that, we have had preliminary meetings with the engineering firm because I also had concerns when I saw the numbers that we were talking about. So there have been some electrical code changes though that again, we're grandfathered. It's kind of like the playground situation. If we're not doing anything new, we don't need to upgrade. However, with these new changes that are being proposed, there's a real potential that we will have to meet current electrical code, which has to do with explosion-proof facilities and ventilation that wasn't previously required. So we've had those meetings and we're working through it with the engineering firm. We've asked for some further information related to those things so we can better understand exactly what the requirements will be related to new code compliance.
Thank you.
Councillor Borneman, then Councillor Bachman.
Is it fair to say that, the mayor has identified, and I agree that this is a weak point in the system, but when the river dissects the community, you've got to cross the river when you only have one plant someplace. Is it fair to say that rerouting pipes, splitting the volume somehow so not less volume would go through pumping station 6 would be a much greater expense than what we see tonight on the budget?
Through your worship, yeah, that would be more than fair to say. Additionally, we're somewhat space constrained in terms of available land mass to work with to be able to accommodate those kind of facilities.
There's two options. Basically, hiving off some of the other side of the river. Well, it still goes through there anyway, because then it goes to Champagne Street, which pumps everything up to the other. But I mean, it's out there that at some point, this community is either going to need a total upgrade on that particular system, or we're going to have to build a new wastewater treatment plant at some point somewhere, which could hive off a portion of the system so that we're not sending as much through pumping station number 6. But if you're talking dollars, that's a huge amount that would have to be looked at sometime in the future. Yeah, yeah. So, yep. So those are the alternatives. Yeah. Councillor Bachman, you're good. Councillor Keith.
Well, I'm thinking, I can appreciate where we are in the budget tonight, but I do think we should be looking at long range for that thought process, because I don't want to see this money basically becoming a sinkhole, because we know there is an issue and we know that this is not going to be the solution. So I think part of planning and long range planning is something that we're going to have to think of in the future. So because we can't just keep putting in more money, we need to have a plan, and we need to plan for that with our reserves and that down the road so that we can separate it.
I think in long-range planning, yes, we do need to take a look at an alternative facility that's going to take a look, and I mean, that should be developed with growth as well, and where we see growth and how that's going to spread through, different areas of the community to make that happen. But that's a study that we should embark on at some particular time. But as it stands, this particular facility needs a new pump. We can't let that pump die or we're going to be in really big trouble. So we need to definitely move on with this particular portion of it to keep that facility functioning. So, yes.
I understand that, and I appreciate, and this is what I'm saying, I realize that we have to go on now, but I don't like to see it as a sinkhole, so therefore doing that long-range planning, because we talk about growth, we talk about housing, all those things, so I think we're probably on the same playing field in that we got to do what we got to do now, but we do have to plan for the future, because that's all I'm saying.
And I think that's something council needs to talk about with staff is, what kind of a study are we going to do that's going to shoot us into the future to look after this, and where would it be best located? So, Councillor Borneman.
Well, we have Mr. O'Donnell here. When is the future? Could you hazard a guess what's our capacity at the existing plant, and how quickly are we using that up?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the issue at hand is not so much the plant itself, but the lift stations that deliver the sewage to the plants. So talking about Station 6 is pretty much at its maximum capacity now. So there's 15 pumping stations, and all but 3 pump into Station 6. So the bottleneck really becomes at the lift stations themselves.
Begs the question, there are a number of housing projects in the throes of moving forward. What happens as we add 150 units, realizing that they too are going to, in all likelihood, go through pumping station 6? Is there a short-term fix? Is there something more required here than what's being proposed tonight, Mr. O'Donnell?
Well, that's
Better to know that.
That's certainly why Louisa Street projects and that sort of thing are welcomed, because it's taking it through a different part of the system. So, yeah.
Through your worship, perhaps I'll comment because we were actually talking about this actually just this afternoon, in terms of there are mitigation avenues for us to explore in terms of reducing flows, inflow and infiltration being one of them, extraneous flows to the sewage system. So those are something that staff have been working on diligently, tracking them back. So we are actively seeking out those opportunities to reduce those extraneous flows through the system, which free up capacity, add additional capability to those lift stations as well, potentially. So those are good management practices, but there's also lots of benefit from it, from exposing or making available capacity within those stations as well.
Because there's been a fair bit of dye testing and smoke testing as well. So we should be trying to take advantage of that material and work with that. I got Councillor McCann, then Councillor Backman.
So, I'm just curious, is this one of the pumping stations that's subject to overflow during bad storms?
Yes.
Through you, your worship, yes, is the short answer.
Would the upgrade help in this situation with that problem, or are we talking apples and oranges here?
No, I would be hesitant to say a definite yes. It will certainly contribute to alleviating that issue. There'll be higher pump efficiencies with a new pump, the potential to be able to move more sewage through that lift station as pumps age. And pump efficiencies of older pumps are quite different than what's available on the market now.
So do I understand then that the capacity would be greater than with this upgrade then?
Potentially. I'm not, like, as I said, I'd be hesitant to, I haven't looked at those numbers specifically, but there certainly would be greater efficiencies and the potential for, now there is, with fluid hydraulics, there is a limit to how much you can put through any given pipe. So there's a limit to based on the design, how much friction to overcome in the pipe and all those sorts of things. But so there is a potential for greater throughput, but I can't comment on exactly what that may be.
Okay, thank you. That's fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Backman?
I'm just thankful that you talked about the infiltration and how it does affect play into the system. And I was just wondering, could you guesstimate as to what percentage the infiltration plays in towards the capacity of that station?
Through your worship, I could. We actually have documentation. I don't have those numbers at hand tonight, but we do have some estimates through the studies that have already been done. So we do have those statistics available.
Could they be shared at some time or reshared?
Yeah. Through your worship, so I'll say yes. We would like to verify exactly what information is contained within that and ensure that we're confident in the numbers that are being presented, but certainly that's something that can be shared, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. The next project here is the transfer station compactors. So 100,000 is in the budget to be funded from a reserve fund. So this is this project at the end of 2018 there was a large surplus and around 300,000, and some of these projects that are in here that are funded from the reserve fund are funded from the surplus from that year. So I just kind of wanted to elaborate on this. This 100,000 is the final amount that's required for the modernization of the transfer station compactors. This creates efficiencies in reducing the transportation costs of waste, the compactors. Okay. The next
Council-
project,
Hang on a sec, Councillor Backman has a question.
Thank you very much. Ms. Phillips, just in regards to the transfer station compactors, what is the life expectancy on those?
Through your worship, typically, equipment within the waste industry would use a 10-year life expectancy. I'm not sure on what numbers this proposal was developed. It's not uncommon that they would last much longer than that. I've experienced similar pieces of equipment that have lasted 15 years. So typically, though, within the waste industry, exceeding 10 years is not recommended in terms of equipment replacement.
Thank you.
okay. So tower insertion meters, so these are flow meters for the water plant, or related to water, for $20,000. IO module upgrades, this relates to water software improvements for $40,000. Water plant VFD blowers, $10,000 is in the budget for that. This relates to the energy conservation plan and projects to try to create cost savings through achieving energy savings. So, under the Health Services Division, cemeteries and land ambulance are under this division. So, ambulance, so there are 2 ambulances here for $135,000 each from the Land Ambulance Reserve Fund, a reserve fund from Land Ambulance. And then paramedic response unit for $75,000. And 2 mowers are in the equipment replacement schedule to be funded from the equipment replacement reserve. One's for $17,000 and the other $25,000.
Councillor Keith?
Yes, I'm just curious, why is one quite a bit more than the other? What this, there's one that, I don't know, is one cutting more? Can you explain this to me?
I know that there are different models of a mower, so I could bring back information about the models. I don't know if, do you recall what models there?
Through your worship, typically different configurations of mowers are used, particularly in cemeteries, given turning radius and steering methods and that sort of thing. So that may very well account for the difference in the pricing. The ability to maneuver within the cemetery is important in certain areas and perhaps not necessary all the time. So it's not unusual to see different types of mowers doing the same job in different areas.
Councillor Keith?
Just for clarification, does that mean then both of those mowers would end up going to each cemetery? You'd take both motors to, they'd be transported over to Sylvian Acres, another day they're back to Hillcrest?
So
is that the idea?
Through your worship, perhaps that's, I haven't gotten familiar enough with the summer equipment as of yet to understand exactly how it's allocated between the 2 cemeteries, but that wouldn't seem unreasonable with my lack of experience.
Your growing experience. There you go. Okay, Ms. Phillips, you're ready to go again.
So I do have a different, additional information on what the mowers are. So the one that we were replacing was a John Deere 1435 out front mower. So it's slightly different from uh, the other riding mower, which is a model X740. So based on the original purchase, that's what's been forecasted, the 17 and the 25. Okay. So moving on to recreation and culture. Under this division, it includes the Bob Orr Community Center, Parks and Recreation, the Charles W. Stockey Center, and Bob Orr Hall of Fame. Projects in this segment are Wabano Beach roof replacement, $15,000 in the budget to be funded from the reserve fund from the 2018 surplus monies. The BOC, the CP station furnace is in here to be funded from the tax levy for $27,420.
That seems like an awful lot for a furnace for a building that size. Are we converting from one heat source to another? Are we installing ductwork? What are we doing that it takes 25 grand to put a furnace in?
Through your worship, 3 quotes were received for this project. It is a gas furnace replacement. There are currently 2 old furnaces in the building that are well past their prime and need to be replaced. We'll be replacing the 2 with 1 high efficiency furnace.
Is there ductwork in the building now? Are we doing something more than just a furnace? Like, it still seems like an awful lot of...
That's the cost that was received, and 3 different quotes were obtained.
Well, just for clarity's sake, then, for this pretty pricey furnace, did you get a lifespan? Like roughly how long? You know, like we have these 2 old furnaces that still seem to be kicking along. So I'm kind of wondering how long were they kicking along that we now are hoping to replace with the expensive ones. So I'm wondering about year longevity.
Through your worship, it's anticipated we'll get 15 to 20 years out of the new high-efficiency furnace. The old furnaces that are in place right now, I can't speak to how long they've been there. What I can speak to is the extensive repairs that we've been doing to them every year for the past 7 years.
The one has to be kicked every so often because it goes out. But I'd be curious if we just did an internet search on whatever type of furnaces they're quoting, and I Mr. Harris just told me what kind of a quote you got. Was that for ducting though and everything?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can tell you from personal experience from just this year, putting a residential furnace in a home that required very minimal ducting, that the price was $20,000. It is very expensive to install a furnace, whether it's in a commercial facility or in a residential site now. And that's from getting multiple quotes for myself in my own personal dwelling.
Wow. Oh wow. Okay. Councillor Backman.
One question for Ms. McNamara, just in regards to the Wabano Beach roof, what style of roofing will be on the?
We're looking to replace the shingles. The roof is currently leaking at the site.
Oh, replacing the shingles with shingles or metal roof?
The quote was for shingles.
Okay. Right. further questions on that? Okay.
Okay, the next project is to resurface the ball fields at Kinsman Park. 40,000 is in the budget to be funded from the tax levy. And this is to address a safety issue with the material that's on the ball fields at the Kinsman Park. So the BOCC engine room panel, 24,850 is in the budget to be funded from reserve funds. Yes.
Councillor Keith, sorry.
Can you just advise me, what does that really mean? I don't know.
Through your worship, the electrical panel in the engine room has been in place since 1975. We've done extensive upgrades to many components of the ice-making equipment in the engine room. We have not upgraded the electrical panel.
Might I ask if it comes back, we just add that little word to it, it's easier for anybody reading this stuff? It's missing, so.
Okay. Yeah. Next item.
Okay. Salt dock, boat dock replacement, 50,000 to be funded from the tax levy.
Councillor Bornman.
What are we propose? We've had a couple kicks at the cat down there over the past several years. What are we proposing now? Just new docks, or is there going to be something done with the, you know, the way they're anchored down there?
Or the actual ramp itself.
Yeah,
going in,
the
because
waves
we've had
and
issues with that before.
It's fine if we're coming back. Maybe you can provide the information.
That would be a good idea.
If that's fair.
Because I know there was work done, and because of water levels and different things like that, it shifted the rock and what went in there. So yeah. Pardon, Councillor Backman?
I was just wondering if it was more of the style of the ones done at the Champlain Street.
I don't know.
Through your worship, specifically, I'll have to come back with more information, but I can tell you that having had experience dealing with an awful lot of areas to do with high water and exposure in different areas, so anchoring is particularly important depending on the location and the actual weather exposure that the dock is subjected to, and I would suggest that particular location is one of our more exposed areas in terms of experiencing weather impacts, and with high water, those are certainly challenging to everybody along the shoreline. So those are certainly concerns that we will look into and make sure we come back with more complete information.
Okay. Good.
Okay, the next project is a washroom renovation project for the Stocky Center. So 50% of this is expected to be funded from reserve, and the other 50% through federal funding. Yes?
Yep. Councillor McCann, then.
Oh, I missed one out.
Sorry.
I've been in the washroom, well, the mail anyway. What needs to be done?
So it's two reasons really that this project's moving forward. There are current AODA standards, so considering our seating capacity, we do have to have a certain number of accessible stalls per seating, and the building's reaching almost 2 decades in age, so plumbing is reaching end-of-life age, wear and tear on the mechanics there.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, I'll move back project there. I missed one. So there's a performance hall lighting consultation fees in here for, so 1,600 is proposed to be funded from federal funding and 14,400 from reserve. And I understand, yeah. Sorry.
Question
Oh, I
on
thought I had
any of
that
that?
up.
No? Okay, keep going.
Okay, 6,000 is budgeted for the commercial freezer at the Stocky Center to be funded from reserve. And 5,000 to replace the Bobby Orr Hall of Fame Top Shot game, funded from reserve funds, and then 5,000 to be funded from reserve funds towards the Bobby Orr Hall of Fame Collections Management Database. The next, okay.
Councilor McCann? The, going back to the Top Shop game, which one is that? Is that the one with the glass bubble on top? What needs to be done there or replaced there?
Through your worship. The Top Shot game is the one that's set up in a small arena. So it's an electronic hockey net that lights up and kids shoot pucks at it. It's divided into grids. So this unit has been in place at the facility since 2013. You can imagine the wear and tear that 5,000 kids put on that unit in a year. So it is coming time to replacement. We have been replacing parts, but it's just not working the way that it's intended to. The sensors have reached the end of their lifespan.
Okay.
The next project is permanent exhibit redesign phase 1 related to the Bobby Orr Hall of Fame. 25,000 is in budget to be funded from reserve funds related to that. This is just phase 1 of the project. Perhaps Caitlin could elaborate a little bit on what's coming with that.
Through your worship. As many of you know, the facility has been open since 2003, and many of the exhibits in the Hall of Fame have been static since that time. The standard lifespan in a museum environment of a permanent or long-term exhibit is about 10 years, so we've already exceeded that span. Many of the technologies in some of our interactive elements are coming to the end of their life. They're beginning to look a little bit dated. I also have some concerns about the materials that were used in the construction of those elements. For example, the fluorescent lighting that's in our existing exhibit cases, it's not the best choice for that application. Fluorescent lighting gives off heat and UV rays, which are not great for the aging of the materials that we are putting on display. This project would be a multi-year project. Ideally, the completion of the full exhibit renovation would occur before 2023 and the facility's 20th anniversary. The first phase would be to contract an exhibit design firm to come in and look at our existing exhibits, what we've got, and come up with a new design for us that we would review with stakeholders and partners. And then we would make a decision about how to move forward, what we're replacing, what is being upgraded. And that would be phase 2 of the project, is once we've got some design ideas, deciding how we'd like to move forward.
Okay. All right. Oh, Councillor Bachman?
In reviewing the recreation and cultural items for consideration, I noticed that there was nothing for garbage can replacements. We had some garbage can replacements last year in our beach and our fitness trail. I don't know if it was all of the fitness trail, but again, in our parks, we continue to have the open bin garbage cans and no recycling, and that is something that many citizens have brought up to my attention since the replacement of the previous garbage cans on our fitness trail. Is that one of the things, by not applying recycling along our fitness trail, and as we replace some of the garbage cans, that we're not really saying we support recycling. So one of the things that I was hoping that we would continue on an annual basis is looking at implementing a small portion of budget for replacement doing a couple every year that are properly contained from animals and raccoons, and I know we have bear issues, and I think when we look at where we replace it, but there are small critters, and again, the seagulls and the birds. I mean, sometimes when you go drive by some of the parks and you see they're overflowed, and I just think that that this is something we should seriously consider, and I don't know if that's something that could be brought back or how the rest of council feels about that, but I would like to be able to support that in this year's budget.
Councillor Keith?
I support Councillor Bachmann's idea of what she's speaking about here, but I think what I know what I'd also like to know, because I recall the past Public Works Director making it quite clear to us, and I see the need. But when you add more cans and you add more recycling, you also need to take into account the employees and the number of employees that you're going to need to follow through with all of this. So I think we need to have we need a better ballpark figure there, because it's not just the amount of cans in replacing. When we're adding, we also know it takes more labor. So I do think we need a little bit more information in that area. I'm wondering if we could get a rough idea for next budget meeting.
Yep, I think that can be looked at, right? All right. Next item.
Okay, so that's the end of capital. Oh, you have to open up just the other. Okay. Yep. So in page 34 of your budget book is the items for council consideration. So that concluded the capital projects for 2020.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Barneman.
Before we go to page 34, Ms. Phillips, page 51 was of interest to me, again, because of the amount of money that we pay for policing. And I see that their levy per household is going down, but we're taking money out of the reserve to pay for a differential there. I think
so
for anybody who looks through this, and some folks will, that deserves an explanation. Is this another bit of downloading that's happening?
So through you, Mr. Mayor. So this comment to transfer police cost stabilization reserve money, to transfer that from reserves. Initially, I had in the budget, we had this in here because the prisoner transportation grant of $117,000 for 2019 was expected to end in 2019. But one of the last minute changes that was made in the budget was that we found out that it was going to be $105,000. So this transfer from reserve isn't happening any longer. But to elaborate on that, the cost from 2019 to 2020 for OPP services are still going up. There's an adjustment from 2018 that reduces the costs so that the budgetary impact is a decrease in year, but there's a delay between when years are finalized. So, but we have a specific reserve set up for OPP policing costs, and we have been transferring any budgetary impact related to this prisoner transportation grant, any surplus, into that reserve to try and offset any future costs increases. So that's one of the policies that council has passed in the past related to that reserve in particular. There's a police cost stabilization reserve that's used for that. So
Councillor Keith? Scott?
So
Yeah.
for the next the next budgetary review, I'll remove this comment. It was one of the final things that we just didn't get that removed in time before preparing the package.
I think Councillor Keith has a
So the net
comment.
impact of that budget,
Okay.
that budget change is that it didn't impact the overall levy requirement. To clear that, the change that we made related to the issue that I'm explaining, yes. Yes, you're welcome.
What I was just going to say briefly is that I more recently attended a roundtable discussion regarding the changes that are coming about with the Police Services Act. And of course, there's going to be recommendations, and it'll be a few months anyways. It'll be definitely not till next year till that act is fully into place in reference to how it will be delivered. But for example, when I see this here, prisoner transport and the grant, I'm hoping that with changes in that act and how municipalities function, that may no longer be a OPP officer that is actually doing that job, and therefore the costs involved will be, of course, hopefully much less than where we are now. So I think some of these costs in respect to OPP, the hope would be in another year when things come about and the legislation and how the municipalities are going to be able to function, that will be of benefit to us as a taxpayers, but it's not going to get fixed up today in reference to this budget.
Okay. So page 34 is under supporting our community, in case anyone's still looking for that. Okay, there's a number of items for council consideration here. The first two items on the list are the increase to contribution for the public library and the museum on Tower Hill. So currently those two items are included in the draft proposed budget, so there's no increase required. If they weren't approved by council, this tax impact would be how much would be removed from the budget, as opposed to, yes. Okay. Here is a clarification on each item as to whether they approve the increase or do not approve the item, or if they want to have discussion on the item. So on the first item, does council want to provide some sort of a direction or
Well, that was part of my suggestion why we could use some of the modernization fund for those things that we are upgrading, and whether it's cameras or fobs or the entrance system and that sort of thing, because then we can take that, instead of that going to the tax levy, and we can take some of this and move that to the actual tax levy, or take that away from it's moving it from one envelope to another to be able to do it. So if we can save the tax levy in one particular area, then we can utilize these funds, and we're not having as much of an impact on the tax levy as what we would if we accepted a lot of these, right?
So for the public library in particular, the increase is actually in the proposed draft budget, but for clarification, council could make a determination just to approve that the increase is okay if that's,
So, Counselor,
or have discussion.
can you clarify that again? So it's actually in the budget?
Just for these two top items, so the increase for the public library or the increase to the museum. So those increases in particular don't require a change to the levy from what's proposed,
Oh.
but the rest of the items in the list
Do.
would require that, yes. So that was why I was elaborating that if it were removed from the budget, that the top two items would actually be a decrease in the levy, but the
Okay.
rest of the items are handled in the other fashion.
Okay, I see that.
Yes.
Here, item number 2, I missed that. Counselor Borneman had a question.
Sorry. All of them, save and except the Georgian Bay Avenue item, would cost the taxpayer less than $15 per year in total.
Yeah, actually, I've got. Okay. Yeah.
So this
Go ahead.
is based on assessment of 100,000. So that would be on 100,000 worth of a
Yeah.
assessment. Yeah.
The Georgian Bay item, I think, is going to be an entirely different story. That is a capital project that needs to be considered, and I think we need to have like an understanding of what that $1 million is doing down there on that in that particular. I understand there's a problem. We need to fix it, but to throw $1 million into the budget and not have a real understanding of what that $1 million is going to do is a tough one to really consider right at the moment. Is that the platinum expense, or is that gold plated, or where are we with that? Councillor Borneman.
Again, for our next meeting, I'm wondering if Mr. Kearns could advise us if there is a design on the shelf, an engineering design, and if there's not, maybe give us an estimate as to what that would cost for design purposes at least. Because chances are, if there is no design, we're pretty unlikely to get anything done this year, even if we find $1 million.
So through your worship, so I can provide you with some of that information right now. We did make the inquiries with our engineers who had been tasked with looking initially at what the issue is and what perhaps could be done to alleviate potential issues. We do not have an engineering design on the shelf. The estimate is somewhere around $74,000 for the engineering work to be done on the project. So my understanding of the project, which is somewhat limited, or of the concerns in the area, certainly I familiarized myself with the correspondence from the residents in the area, and I was familiar somewhat very quickly when I started with some of the concerns in the area. I think it would be fair to say that the development was initially completed without considering stormwater impacts, so which is certainly something that is not a typical process anymore. So developments nowadays, there's requirements in the development process to address stormwater impacts and concerns prior to developing something similar to this. So we would be looking at the initial estimates are around $74,000 for the engineering, and the initial estimates of completing the work would be in the $1 million range.
I don't believe this item should be here. I think it should be more in a capital plan instead of being what I'm seeing on most of this is, you know, some upgrades, fix it here, that sort of thing, like nothing huge. You know, this bit on Georgian Bay Avenue is more like Isabella Street, you know, where the work was done to upgrade that particular area. And I think we need to be, that should be brought back under another section, with some consideration of, you know, do we have reserves that are going to help pay for this? Do we have some gas tax money that might help pay for this? Do we have some other avenues of funding that could help support this $1 million cost on this?
So knowing that the impact of the entire project is 1 million, if council would like additional information, we could request give direction for a report. So by providing it in this list, if council wishes that, then as we get to the item, we could, that's, I guess, how we should
I think a report
proceed.
would be really good.
Yeah, and then we can provide some funding options if council wishes.
Yes. Okay, that would be great. Councillor McCann?
Thank you. Just a comment, actually, with regards to the public library and museum, and I'll suggest also community support services. I know every request is important and everyone needs money. In particular, these organizations have faced some extraordinary costs in the last year or so. And with their growth and with some of their planning, I just wanted to remind council that that these asks didn't come just on a whim. They were well thought out and well considered, and so I just wanted to make that point clear that that the money was needed, and yeah, I just didn't want. I don't want to sound like I'm favoring these particular organizations, but the need is there.
Councillor Bachman and then Councillor Borneman.
I would just like to speak with regards to the two of the boards that I sit on with the increases that they do ask for this year. Just to remind council, the increase to the contribution to the public library really equals down to a cost of living increase. I'd really like to note that the staff at the library this year worked extremely hard, especially in their fundraising efforts, which really goes over and above their job descriptions, but their contributions definitely do not go unnoticed when they raised $26,000 of their own monies this year. So that was very good contribution, and it shows that they are working very hard to mitigate any negative impact of these costs, as well as just to show the importance of the library this year. Just again in July, they had a 60% increase in visitation. 14,000 people, 500 came through the doors, and I think if my memory serves me, I recall about approximately 70,000 people, 72,000 people walked through those doors, which was more than double from the previous year. So, you know, that shows more costs to washroom usage, water usages, and many of the amenities, you know, the services that we can't really control in those costs. So, and with regards to the increase with the park to park, I mean, I think it was evident in the reports that I gave this year that the repair work on the bridges was exceeded anyone's expectations, and the cost, even though we did have a lot of support through the OFSC this year, which really kept the, without their help, we would have closed those bridges down this year, and of course all the volunteers that saved the organization a lot of money, which we are very grateful. It is evident that there are still I want to say hundreds of thousands of dollars of bridge work that we are still finding money for. So, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, I'll make a comment here before I go to Councillor Borneman, and that is, I mean, these are already, the public library and the museum are already in the budget, so there's no real impact on it, so I mean, that's fine, and we certainly appreciate those two. With regard to Park to Park Trail, whatever we end up doing with that, that's fine, but I will remind council and everyone that, and I don't mean to begrudge anybody, but we have to do repair on our bridge, we have to do repair on our trail, and without that bridge, we eliminate the link through from north to the south, because the Snowmobile Club relies on our fitness trail for a passage through for snowmobiling in the winter, and we get no funding from the area for it. The taxpayers of this community pay the whole shot. So, you know, if we can help them out a bit, but the taxpayers of this community end up footing the bill for all of that fitness trail that we look after. So, yes.
Just having said that, is there opportunities that we can look at approaching OFSC and looking at different funding options?
We can ask them, but I don't know. They don't seem to look our way when funding comes in. Councillor Borneman.
Well, I don't want to get into the weeds too much on Park to Park, but I think the payback is of that trail to the town is far beyond $2,000.
Oh, yeah.
My question was, I'm not sure for who. I don't see Ms. Herdman's pretty near the only staff member I don't see here tonight who has an item on the list, but I'm assuming that the columbarium, you know, we're planning an expenditure this year, but I'm assuming that there will be revenues derived from that directly into the town's coffers as time goes on, in excess of what we're planning to spend.
Yeah. My suggestion was going to be that we take some from the cemetery reserve fund and put towards the columbarium, so that that would help offset that 40,000, and we could use some of that, because we are going to get a payback, and as long as the payback goes into the reserve, then it ends up being a wash. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Councillor Keith.
I guess a couple things. I guess I would feel really comfortable if we just kept on order, because I find we're jumping around here, and so that I just don't find it quite as consistent for myself. But in any event, besides that, seeing as our last discussion was the columbarium, I'd ask for a little bit more figures and information on that, because I certainly, before I ask Mr. Cairns for a comment, I do support the idea of that, but I'm also wondering, are we talking about an upright columbarium in Sylvian Acres also? That is one of my concerns. It seems to me that would be something would be more popular than the low ones that we have at Hillcrest.
Through your worship, thank you to Ms. Herdman. So she did provide me with the information that perhaps is going to be helpful right now. So the very last comments on what I'm looking at is certainly talking about the tall columbarium, and certainly in my past experience, they're more desirable for whatever reason. In terms of sales, the higher niches have a different price range, and certainly sell out before the lower do in any particular structure. So that is being considered. I'm not aware that it was an immediate, but it is certainly in the thought process that we're looking at going forward for both Hillcrest and Sylvan. I don't know if you want me to comment on some of the payback numbers that that we've experienced. Perhaps that'll just help give you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of. So the indications are that the initial cost for the 3 units, including the site preparation work at the time, was around $26,000. So the first niche was sold on August 21st, 2014. I won't go through all the the statistics here on sales. So there's only 2 left in the tall one. And it's different, but left side and right side certainly sell at different rates for whatever reason. It's got something to do perhaps with compass points on the compass and that sort of thing, and sunsets. And I know in my past experience, that has been the case. So the revenue from the sale of the 51 sold units was about $33,000, and there's still 21 units available. So that's kind of where we stand now. But columbarium are an interesting. Sometimes they take time to design, develop, order. But certainly you want to make sure that you have space available within reason, but not obviously the capital investment, being cognizant of that.
And you know, we've had conversations, Councillor Keith is right, we've had conversations about having something in Sylvan Acres because people prefer that cemetery over the other one. So I think, you know, we need to be cognizant of that to make sure that that's there. Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing I would say is Sylvan Acres still has a lot of open spots, shall we say, whereas Hillcrest is getting kind of closed up. So that's the other issue. I think also we could put it down to terms of equality or choice is you have it in one cemetery and you should have a columbarium in the other cemetery. And I looked at statistics, and I'm sure any of us, if we go to a funeral now, we'll see more and more cremations are occurring. And so I looked at the latest statistics that I could find, and between 2005 there was 51.6% cremations now in Ontario, and I'm talking Ontario, and now by 2011 we're at 58.7% in Ontario, whereas if we look at statistics nationally for Canada, and that's even a few years back, 2009 it's 68.4%. So we see this as a need. This is an opportunity to provide choices to people, to provide a service to people, and if we happen to get a few dollars too to help all our taxpayers out, seems to me it's a good deal and we should be getting to it.
Yep. Okay, so we did kind of start this one with a shotgun approach, and I'd like to bring it back into some order, and I just want to say that with regard to item 11, I do agree with Councillor Borneman that, you know, the $2,000 or whatever for the park-to-park trail increase is a minor amount, and it does help us a lot. It's just the other does get me going a bit. So anyway, we'll start with item number 1. All those in favor of item number 1? That's carried. Item number 2, favor of number 2. That's carried. Number 3, portable speed indicator. Councillor Borneman. Oh, okay, all right, okay. All in favor of the portable. That's carried. Community sharps bin. Councillor Keith, you have a...
I have clarity here because I need clarity. It looked to me like there was 2 options here. Option 1 of outsourcing and option 2. And so I just wanted clarity. Is that correct? So that if in proving that, then would there be a report coming back, or how would it be determined whether one goes with option 1 or option 2?
Okay, so option 1 was to outsource the maintenance of the bin, and option 2 was to provide that with internal staffs, to support the bin with internal staff. So option 1 is the lower impact option to the budget. Oh, sorry, backwards. Option 2 is the lower impact option to the budget, and that's based on the external maintenance provider can get volume discounts on some of the materials that are required for pickup and drop off, and April has prepared a backgrounder related to item 4 in particular, so maybe she can elaborate on some of the discussions that she's had.
Through your worship, just to clarify, to outsource the cost of a bin that's been provided by the health unit, so to outsource all the costs involved with collection of the sharps, disposal of the sharps, and maintenance of the bin would be approximately $2,000. If town staff were to do it, it would be more money because the third-party contract does have bulk buying options. It wouldn't cost them as much. The town, if we were responsible for the program, the town is still responsible for the HHW cost, the household hazardous waste cost, of then taking these big bins and taking them off to Brendar, where we outsource our HHW. Further, if I may, a report would have to come back to council with their preferred option as to if they were interested in this endeavor. Further, we'd have to look at a location for this gifted bin.
Councillor McCann.
So my question would be, it sounds like option one is, would be the best one to go with. Would we go with a contract for a year? Is that how that sort of thing would work?
Through your worship, the bin would be the town's an alternative, right? Until such time as it fails or it needs to be replaced. We would have to examine cost crunch and do the analysis on this contract on an annual basis to determine if it was still feasible.
So the outsourcing, I'm a little confused then. The outsourcing is, are we paying a company to put the bins in and to empty them?
Through your worship, to clarify, we're speaking about one bin that the health unit would gift. Inside of this bin is the receptacle which holds all the sharps. The option one would be this third-party contract coming in, removing that inner unit, replacing it with another inner unit, and disposing of all of those biohazard sharps.
Thank you.
Somebody got a recommendation? Option one? Okay. Doug? Okay. All in favor of option number one then? That's carried, it's option one. Okay, Georgian Bay Avenue. Now, I was going through the reserves. I'm going to throw this out to council because there obviously is an engineering component that needs to be done on this, which hasn't been done but needs to be done. We have roughly $401,000 in the Transportation and Winter Control Reserve. Okay, so we're already budgeting for winter control. So do we need $401,000 in winter control reserves to, it's a just in case scenario. So can we take maybe $200,000 from that and put it into other locations? Because we could spend $75,000 on the engineering, okay, from that particular area and pay for that. We also have, and I hate to jump over here, but we have the transportation services, Wabick Avenue, Belvedere three-way crossing. We've got $30,000 in that one as well. We could look at putting money towards that from that reserve, okay, as well, saving $30,000 on the levy. The other thing that we could do, okay, is set up a reserve, and the reserve with maybe 70,000 or whatever in it. There are issues and problem areas within the community that happen that haven't, there's no documentation, and I'll use the one on Victoria Avenue that we had last year that we ended up dealing with. And there's others throughout the town that if we can have a reserve set aside, that whether it ends up being us a mutual fix or that sort of thing or something done, but we've got some money set aside to deal with some of those situations on whatever basis that it is, instead of starting with 0. I'm just, because these are going to keep coming along. And if we don't do something, well then, or have something there, and we end up in legal battles and that sort of thing, that's just going to cost us a whole lot of money and get people's backs up, and everybody will be angry, and and it all ends up costing us money, and we may end up having to pay for it anyway, or part of it. So I'd like to begin with that suggestion based on this particular item, because we do need to find some money for some engineering. Discussion. We'll start with Ms. Phillips first, and then Councillor Keith.
So for the winter control reserve, there's a reserve and a reserve fund policy as set by council, where we must maintain at least 25% of the average winter control cost over a 5-year period. So before we would transfer a certain amount out, we would have to do at least an evaluation as to what that exact figure is.
Okay.
But it's like an approximation would be at least or on or around maybe 275,000 as a minimum kind of thing to remain in there at least.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Councillor Keith?
Yes, I was thinking a couple things. One would be maybe because the comments about some of this for Georgian Bay Avenue being a capital project, and so some of that figure should be in another area of this budget, not here to start with. So maybe if we just had Georgian Bay Avenue here, the engineering report, and we had whatever 75,000 in this line item here, move the other stuff over to capital, and we'll come back the next time, see how things go there. So that was my suggestion in reference to that, so rather than just dipping in right away to the winter control fund. But if Ms. Phillips can come back at the next meeting and give us that option too, then we'd have a couple of things that we could be looking at.
Yep. Yep. But I would like to take a look at that fund. I mean, there's money stacking up in there that we could be utilizing and solving a few issues. So, yes.
May I also say that one of the best practices that other municipalities are doing is that as winters are becoming more harsh in Ontario municipalities, they're experiencing more like extreme weather events or like flooding issues and things like that. So I think if we were to create another reserve, the purpose of the reserve should be a general purpose, maybe to deal with a risk associated with water, or that could be the way we would look at it.
Could
but
be. Could
how
be.
we come back with something like that.
Yeah. Let's. I'll let Councillor Borneman, I think you had a question, and then I'd like maybe a report or something come back for the next budget meeting to take a look at this and what we can do. Yeah. Environmental reserve or something, yeah. Oh.
I mean, the other thing I was going to say is you'd already pointed out, Your Worship, that perhaps the $40,000 for columbariums can come out of the cemetery reserve.
Well, that'll be the next one after.
Yes.
Number 7.
No, but I'm saying if we're going to start talking about shifting things around, maybe that's how we to build that $75,000.
Can be. Yep.
That's how we do it.
Yep. So let's have something come back with regard to item number 5, and maybe shifting that it's the engineering that's in this particular portion of it, and how we can work that out. That would be good. So number 6, the Tower Hill cabin interior.
The file before you on the presentation screen says that this item's been updated. So consultations have happened with the original community partners that presented this item since the preparation of the budget, and they have, those consultations resulted in deferring this item until the completion of the recreation master plan.
Okay. So it's a, okay.
Yes.
As a suggestion, maybe in the future, and we take a look at it, I mean, we have money in the building replacement reserve fund, and maybe we take a look, I mean, that's a pretty small amount of money, and we could look at taking it from that, and then and then it's fixed, it's done, right? So, anyway, that's out, we can take a look at it another time. So number 7, columbarium for Sylvan Cemetery, and yes.
I do have some additional information. So in our research, we found that there was a resolution from 2014 that transferred 25,000 to a columbarium reserve. So the reserve later was combined with the general cemetery reserve. So the balance of that reserve is now 37,745 combined. So we know, at least from past council resolutions, that 25,000 of what's in that reserve was dedicated towards columbarium replacement.
Council good with that? This side's good? That side? You're good with taking the 25 and putting it towards that? Okay. Okay, that's good. So 25,000 will come from the reserves to offset that.
So on number 8, there's an item to improve, install sidewalks on Avenue Road, Margaret, Marion, Ethel, and Victoria Streets. So in 2019, there was a street scan done where we collected data related to roads and sidewalks throughout the municipality. Additional work's required to analyze the data and come back to council with and develop like service levels and prioritize all the information that we have as we advance our asset management plan into the future. So right now, that's why no change to the rates or tax impact has been provided here, just because there's additional work to be required.
That's good. Okay, any discussion on that? No? Okay. Number 9. And number 9 was one that I was thinking too, that we could take from the winter control and transportation or whatever, and do that realignment or whatever needs to be done with the 3-way crossing at that. So that could come back as part of that report too, possibly.
Okay, or funding options for.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Councillor McCann.
Is this the 3-way stop, like, or we're talking about realignment and such, and I know this is a bad corner. So traffic would come to a halt then?
No, I don't think, it's just a crossing, sorry. Wrong terminology. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions on that one? No? Okay, so that can come back. Park to Park Trail, everyone in favor of the 2,000 for Park to Park Trail? Okay, that's carried. West Parry Sound District Community Support Services, 2,000. Councillor McCann.
If I could speak to that, and Councillor Borneman, maybe you could correct me if my memory fails me here. The ask is new this year. The community support services programs have grown, and the baby boomers are aging out, so the need just continues to grow. So the money is needed. One of the problems that we just very recently found out that the CSS has to deal with is the fact that they were getting some money for exercise programs, and as they conducted the exercise programs, they found that the need wasn't as great as they anticipated, and so some of that money wasn't used to the tune of $45,000, which the government is taking back. Meanwhile, very recently, the exercise programs have picked up in popularity, and so now, and of course, your budgets are set based on what you use and what you spend. So there's a bit of a is it a $45,000 deficit? May not be the correct word to use, but it's a hardship for CSS, which, as I say, is growing, and it's serving a demographic, that I think is well deserving of the services that are available. And so I would encourage council to support this one.
Councillor Borneman.
I'm going to go about this in a different way. I think there's a huge transition in Ontario health. It's cheaper to allow people to remain in their home than it is to have them either in hospital or a long-term care facility, and it's probably better for them in the long run as well. So on that basis, I think it's almost a no-brainer to support this. It's far more cost-effective than any other thing that we can be doing in this instance.
Councillor Keith.
No disagreement with those last comments, but again, it says that the province should be giving the municipality more money to be able to deal with these issues rather than us just doing it on our own. We should be getting some more money, and that again says to me, whether it's AMO, whether it's other municipalities, but we need to push that some more to get that message through.
I agree. We also need money for courtroom security and prisoner transfer too, and which would help us out significantly. All in favor of this amount? Okay, that's 2,000. That's number 11. Number 12, donations of services in kind exceed sponsorship requests. So, I think we're doing our part with regard to the 3-pitch. So, all in favor of that? That's carried. One thing that's not on here that I would like us to consider is we had an ask, and whether it gets spent or it doesn't, but at least $2,000 towards the warming center, center at the warming. Good gosh, it's getting late. It's been a very long day for me. For the warming shelter at the Mary Street Center. Yes, Chief Thompson.
Through your worship, for that particular issue, just so council has full information, prior to this budget book being put together, that was one of the items that was going to be put into this particular list. I consulted with the principals of the initiative, and they have ceased operations. They're not planning to move forward with that particular project.
Oh.
So just so you have full information with regards to that particular issue.
Okay. All right then. Okay, that answers that question. Councillor Bachman.
Just one question, and I guess this question is for Mr. Pengra. Earlier this month, I know you participated in a, I guess, demonstration with Georgian Bay Forever, and there was potentially something they would like our council or town to consider. And I was just wondering, is that something that you would be potentially bringing back for council to look at, and if any cost would that be in this year's budget? And if you can just elaborate on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is in regards to the devices called C-bins, which are essentially a trash can in the water that gather up plastic debris or any garbage really, but they specialized in microplastics. The demonstration that we saw, both Vanessa and I, was put on by Georgian Bay Forever, and kind of the way I've left it with them is they're applying for funding. If at all possible, they would hopefully be able to provide the bins. Ultimately, we would still have to provide hydro or any other infrastructure that they might be attached to. There's a lot of questions still with it. As far as, is it part of this budget? No. But assuming we got the devices for free through some sort of a grant or funding, I don't know how significant the cost would be.
Just follow up, is this something that you'll be reporting to council back on at a future date, or?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. More or less, once we understand what funding options are available, they don't come cheap. They're, you know, above and beyond the purchase cost. They do need to be maintained daily, which, you know, we would have to look at the operational costs associated with that, or form some sort of a community partnership with some sort of a group to maintain those.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor McCann.
Thank you. This is for Mr. Thompson. Getting back to the warming center, do you know if there's any consideration for plans in the future to put this together? I thought it was a good idea and something that was certainly needed. The logistics doesn't seem like they came together, though.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with my conversation with the principal of the initiative, there were issues with the partnership, is the way I understood it, in trying to pull the whole program together. And whether they'll take another kick at the can again or not, that information was not forthcoming. But there was, I believe, more issues than just funding. It was the overall package of the program.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right. So I have a resolution here. It's moved by Councillor Bornham and seconded by Councillor Burden, that the staff report the 2020 draft budget package and presentation be received for information purposes, and that council provide the following direction with respect to the budget requests titled items for council consideration. 1. Library at $7,840 approved. Museum $1,272 approved. 3. Speed indicator $3,900 approved. Number 4, community sharps option 1 $2,130 approved. Georgian Bay Avenue deferred for further consideration. That's within this budget process. Tower Hill cabin removed from the budget. Columbarium $25,000 from reserves to offset. Number 8, sidewalks Margaret deferred. Number 9, Wabick Belvedere 3-way deferred. That's coming back, right? For more information.
Requested a report.
With deferred with more information. Yeah. Park to Park, $2,000 approved. Number 11, community support, $2,000 approved. And Rotary 3-pitch services in kind approved. Any discussion on that? Oh, yes, ladies.
Oh, so for future requests related to Rotary Club 3-pitch, Strikes Against Cancer, since it has been council's general practice to approve services in kind only, can we seek direction just to not consider this as part of the list for 2021?
Fair enough.
Yes.
It was, I mean, they made a deputation,
Yeah.
and it was, I think Councillor McCann suggested, and it was brought forward in that particular manner. So that's how it ended up on the list.
Okay.
But I think going forward in the future, I think we understand where we're at with this, that our services in kind well exceed a donation.
Thank you.
Of those. So is that fair enough for consideration? Okay. Now, as far as the list go, any comments on whatever? Oh, sorry, Ms. Gilbert. Sorry.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, there is an error in regards to the community sharps bin.
Okay.
The $2,130 there would be the operating budget impact. Regardless of the option, there is a $1,000 capital budget impact. So that should read $3,130 instead of $2,130.
Okay. All right. That's changed. Councillor McCann?
So just for clarification, then with the items that have been deferred, it doesn't mean that we're not dealing with them. It's just that in this regard, they're not coming out of this particular motion.
Right, we'll deal with them at the next meeting. Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. Any other questions? All in favor then? That's carried, thank you. So next I have direction. Could I have a mover and seconder for the direction? Councillor McCann, Councillor Keith. The council sets the date of blank as special meeting of council to further review the draft 2020 budget. Now, I am away next week in Quebec for Federation of Canadian Municipalities meetings. I'm going to ask a question of our staff, and that is would you be able to have the information that we've deferred and have that information back for the 9th or the 10th of March? Is that too much, too lean?
So I have a something planned, like for my family to do on those specific days. So
Okay, all right.
I don't want to say what that is open here, but
How about the 18th?
yes, that's fine.
That's okay. All right. Any? So?
We're okay with that? I thought we were aiming for Tuesday, sorry.
Well, that's council on the 17th.
Yeah, okay. You want a special meeting for this?
I think we should. Yeah. Yeah. Given we've been 2 3/4 hours tonight.
Yeah, no, I was thinking an opposite Tuesday.
I'm hoping the next one will be a little bit shorter, but let's 7 o'clock would be probably great. Okay. Okay. So the direction now reads, the council sets the date of March 18th at 7 p.m. as a special meeting of council to further review the draft 2020 budget. All in favor? And that's carried. And just that one now? Good. Okay. So moved by Councillor Keith and seconded by Councillor Bachman that bylaw number 2020-7019, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? And that's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? It's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith and seconded by Councillor Bachman that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time. Passed, signed, and sealed. All in favor? And that's carried. Prior to adjourning, before I say that, I would like to thank all those from the public and that were here for this particular meeting, and I would like to thank all of our staff for being here. It was good to see other people within the departments here as well, which I thought is really, really important. That was good, and council for all their work and consideration on this. So again, prior to adjourning, I'd like to offer the following information to the public regarding the next council meeting. The next regular meeting of council for the town of Parry Sound is scheduled for Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020 at 7 p.m. and will be held in the council chambers. The chambers are located on the top floor of 52 Seguin Street. Public access to the building is off Gibson Street. All regular council meetings are held at 7 p.m. on the first and third Tuesday of each month, except January and August, where only one regular meeting is scheduled. Regular and special meetings are live streamed and recorded. Please check news and public notices on our website at www.parrysound.ca for instructions to watch live or recorded council meetings. Prior to a council meeting, agendas, changes to the council meeting schedule, and notices of special council meetings are posted on the town's website at www.parrysound.ca under News and Public Notices. You can view an electronic copy of the complete agenda with supporting reports on the town's website. Search council calendar and the date of the meeting. Contact the town clerk or make a request through our website if you wish to receive the combined agenda via email. The minutes of council meetings are posted within 2 days after the council meeting on the town's website. Your TV airs council meetings on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. following a regular council meeting, and for Cogeco listings, contact www.yourtv.tv. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.